Welcome to Funnell Your Thoughts, a podcast about people's interesting lives. I've brought a good friend of mine, Jamie Parker, on with us tonight, mainly because we had such a great conversation when we did our episode, and I think our back and forward was great. So I thought it would only be right to have you on to do this little intro.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm very excited to get into it and flip the table a little bit, so to speak, and hear your thoughts on your own podcast.
Let's go.
So why do you think you should have this job? Why do you want to work for this company? Well, the real question is, where should we start? Why don't we start at the very beginning? Why are we in here, Joe? Why are we doing this? Why are you doing this? How did this come to be?
How did this come to be?
What's your origin story?
The origin story, this has been in the making for years, actually. And it started with the realization that my grandparents are getting older. These stories that they get through generations, and Granny was amazing in her own right at remembering stories from the generations before. And maybe that's something that I'm maybe not so good at. I knew that my grandparents were getting older, and I knew that everyone's got a story, no matter who you are, what life you've lived. And I knew that one day I personally won't retain every story she's ever told me, and I won't be able to retain the key little details that sometimes make those stories even more special. And so I had big fright about losing that. And I don't know about your grandparents, but mine have always said, one day we might write a book. Well, they never do. And it's
sure
it would be amazing if they did, but I think the concept I came up with my head, and I actually told Granny, and she said, this is amazing. You have to follow your dreams and you have to do this. And if I was in a better position back then, she would have gone nuts, and she would have absolutely loved this. And I probably would have struggled to get her out, and it probably would have been a 12-hour episode that I'd have to cut up, because she had some amazing stories, and she lived a life 10 times over, really, in everything that she did, and helping disabled children from the war. And yeah, the things she went through as well that built resilience for just her as a person. I personally want to keep those stories and preserve them for the generations to come. And I think having my grandma sat in front of me here telling me the stories firsthand, if my kids were to see that on YouTube or on a platform where they're actually watching their grandmother relay the stories with the emotion and with the expression, I think they'll be remembered, or at least I hope they'll be remembered forever. One of when I was talking about the setup and how to do things with people online on some of the forums, a lady put it amazingly, and I wish I could take credit for this. It's in my bio for the podcast and things, but she said, imagine if you could go back 300 years and watch a podcast of your great ancestors. How amazing would that be?
That would be really cool, really insightful as well.
Exactly,
because you're learning about people throughout of history.
Yeah,
but like of a very different history.
Exactly.
It's one thing to talk to someone who lived 50 years ago, but over 100 years ago, that's a whole other, literally an other generation.
Yeah. And I want it more to be about the people's stories than any sort of form of content. It's got to be, what makes them who they are today. And I think for a lot of people, for me, I find that incredibly interesting, the makeup and, what you went through and
the story, like you said earlier, their story.
100%.
And also, if they're telling you their story and it's on record, it is very much their story rather than, say, an oral tradition that's passed down. Yeah. Things are changed, things are embellished, whereas this is their story straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Yeah. And it's on record. It's their story, like you said about your granny. If you were to record her, it would have her inflections, her way of speaking, her facial tics, expressions, and I think that's a really cool thing. Isn't it great we've got the technology to do this?
Oh, incredible. And I only wish 300 years ago they had similar and could have done something like this. It would be incredible to learn. Imagine going back to the 1700s and
that'd be so interesting. And hearing how they talk as well.
Yeah.
And do they have significantly different mannerisms for us? Do they talk in very different ways, or are their manners similar to ours? That'd be fascinating. But thanks to what you're doing, they'll have a record of that 300 years from now. Assuming we're all still here, which we probably will be, I would imagine.
Hopefully so. Yeah. Hopefully so. So my aim is, no matter the story, anyone and everyone who wants to come on and share their story is more than welcome. I think it's important to note that it's as much for them as much as it is for me to learn, and obviously to publish on the podcast. I think it's amazing to have that for their future generations, to have that published and on record, as so to speak. So yeah,
that's very cool, because one of the questions I was going to ask you was quite simply, why should people listen to your podcast? But you've kind of answered that already.
Yeah.
And I think it's a very good answer. What do you think people risk missing out on if they didn't listen to these stories? I mean, obviously you could be very specific with regards to an individual and their own story, but what is it that you're hoping people will take away or get most out of listening to these kinds of podcasts?
I think sometimes in modern life, things are very quick. Everything's quick, on the train, off the train, got to get to work, got to get to the gym, got to do this. And I think nowadays, on the most part, I think we miss out on having these interactions and learning about people. And the times where I have, the biggest memory was a train to Edinburgh. And I bought, a book and things, and I thought I'd be on the train the whole time reading a book. None of that happened. I ended up I think it was 4.5 hours, the whole journey, I was talking to this chap who happened to sit, I was on a 4-table seat. I just chatted the whole journey.
I thought you were going to say, I ended up on my phone.
No.
That's much better.
But I think now, observant-wise, it's so rare to have those interactions and to learn what people have gone through. And I think it's very important to know that everyone has had a story and everyone's had the struggles. And I think sometimes in the modern world, we can sometimes feel quite alone, if that makes sense.
Yeah. In fact, I've read about this, especially in somewhere like London, which some say now is a very lonely city, even though it's obviously very densely populated.
Yeah.
But because even though you're physically close to lots of people all the time, you're not emotionally close. You're not intimate.
No.
Really.
So hopefully there's that. You're getting something that maybe we're missing out on in the sort of community social aspect on, people's makeup and where they came from, how it got to where they are now, and some of the incredible sort of life stories about certain things that they've been through, and actually bring a sense of maybe a bit more togetherness.
You're seeing a side of people that you wouldn't necessarily otherwise see.
Yeah. You listen to a podcast about someone and what they've been through and their makeup, and it's similar to maybe what you're going through now, and to realize that there is light at the end of the tunnel. And if I, could do this or find out that and then push through, I can, like this lady or this man, push forward and achieve it or do it or get out of the hole. Or
if they can do it, I can do it.
Yeah.
I think that's a very hopeful message. It's a very inspiring thing, because we all want to hear about something positive when we're feeling low and down, and we always want to know that there's going to be light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
And as an ex-girlfriend of mine once said to me, it's the hope that dies last. Luckily, it was in a funny context, so that's fine. But being able to give that to people is a wonderful thing, I think.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think what you'd get out of listening to the podcast is that we are all individual. We have all been through similar things, but we are all individual in what makes us, sitting here today, really, which I think is a really interesting concept. And I would like to listen to a podcast that goes into people's history just in general. So I'm really excited. I am really excited.
Is there anything so far that's been a real eye-opener for you? Have you discovered or learned anything that's been quite shocking or overly exciting? What's been some of the best moments or experiences you've had so far in recording the episodes you've done?
So far, the best experience, I'd say, as a whole, not necessarily what I've learned or what I've done this in particular, but I finish every one and I'm like, that was amazing. I can't wait for the next one. And I think for me, I learn so much through the conversation and the dialogue because you're thinking about their story, thinking about a question to ask them, and then going from there. And I think that is one of the best ways of retaining information. But some of the most amazing things I've learned is that you can meet people so randomly and they have such an incredible story, from being homeless to turning their life around, and the persistence to turn up every day and we don't have any work for you. Well, I'll do it for free. I'll turn up every day. And the makeup to some people and the drive and the determination to change where they are to then become, a world traveling nail manicurist is something that's pretty incredible. And a year ago today, I never thought I would be sitting here having spoken to a global nail manicurist, but I have, and I've learnt about that. And I didn't realize what goes into Pink traveling for her world tour. She has a nail manicurist that goes with her. Did you know that?
I had no idea.
Exactly.
No, wouldn't have even guessed it.
No. And I met her randomly in the pub, which just then full circle goes back to, we've all got amazing stories. And this lady was decorating the pub at the time, and I got chatting and she said, oh yeah, I'm normally a nail manicurist and I've done nails for such and such. And you're like, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Fancy coming on a podcast?
Cool.
So, and that's exactly how it happened. And similarly with Lisa, who does the hedgehog rescue.
Yes. Yeah. I was amazed by her story when you told me.
So again, just by chance, that's the premise, is you just happen to meet people and the story that creates the makeup. Did I know that Lisa was on track to be an Olympic gymnast? No. She had a rare bone condition. She broke her back and then went on to keep studying and studied random things like, I'm sure it was carpentry and different subjects like that then led up to the makeup of the hedgehog building. And I think those sorts of stories are amazing.
And so unexpected as well.
Yeah.
As they say, that the truth is sometimes stranger than fiction. And that's a real true story.
Yeah.
It's not from a piece of fiction. That really has happened to someone.
Yeah.
And on your podcast, you're hearing it from them.
Yeah.
From, I was about to say the character, but they're not character. They're a real living person. And you're hearing it straight from them.
Yeah.
And their experience and how they've ended up where they've ended up.
Exactly that. And I think the biggest reason I wanted it filmed is, as I said earlier, when people relay stories and maybe traumatic events that have led up to who they are today, I think it's important to have the emotion behind that. And I know podcasts for the most part people listen to, and that's amazing. But I think to have a record, not only to listen but to watch and to see the emotion is key onto sort of why I wanted to do it and to have it filmed.
It reminds me of something someone said to me, which was that you should interview your parents and film it, because when they're gone, you'll want more than photos. I think that ties in with this quite nicely.
Yeah.
But it comes back full circle to what you were saying earlier about having that on record, having that history. It's not just the experience and the connection and the story. It's also having a record of that person.
Yeah.
Really, and I mean, as of yet, with current technology, the closest thing you'll have to them in the flesh, as it were.
100%.
Do you have? Would you say is there a particular audience that you're expecting to gravitate towards your podcast, or could it be for anyone?
I think it's for everyone. I'm not a fan of niches.
Generally, or with podcasts?
Generally, I like a bit of, I am a bit creative in the way that I don't like to just do one thing in general. And I think it's great to have the flexibility of not having a niche or in certain aspects a target audience. I think there'll be specific episodes that appeals to different audiences. I think naturally I watch specific podcasts and I don't watch every episode. I read the little description and I'll choose, that I'm going to find that one interesting. But the next one about, I don't know, something that I have no interest in whatsoever, I probably won't watch. Whereas other people are probably exactly the same. So I'd like to think that you read the brief description all right on each guest and you make your own decision on whether it's the one you want to watch.
I like that. I think that's a very good answer.
Yeah.
It's quite all-encompassing. Is there anything that you're... because how many episodes have you recorded thus far?
I have done 11.
11? Wow. 11. Okay, yeah, loads.
But I've technically done 11 episodes, and
10 of which will be released.
10 of which will be released, or at least I hope so, because there is still 6 of them under review.
Oh right, sure, okay.
So I give people the chance. I don't want to feel. I want people to come on and feel as relaxed as possible, because ideally I want it to feel like a conversation and not an interview, because I think an interview has a different feeling to it. If I'm sat here asking you, so where did you grow up? So what was it like where you grew up? So to me, I'll lose interest listening to that. Whereas you have a gripping conversation with emotion and it just flowing is far better. I say to people, you will get the chance to review it. If there's anything you don't like, we can take it out. Just to avoid that, is he going to ask me something that I'll feel under the spot to answer, or say something that I shouldn't say? I don't want people to feel like that. So they do get the chance.
I think it's very honourable of you. I think it's a very good thing to do. Plus, it means, when once they're happy with it and it goes out, everyone's happy.
Yeah, exactly.
And it covers you as well.
Yeah,
of course. Is there anything that you're excited about to change or to try going forwards? Because you've already done at least 10. Is there anything that you're going to try differently? I know that you've already mentioned earlier to me about the new software and things changing in terms of the technology you've got. Is there anything technological, or just in terms of the content and how you conduct the podcast? Is there anything that you're going to change or implement going forwards?
Change or implement? A little. So there's certain things that I know I need to improve on just generally. I say a lot. So I'll go, that really annoys me.
That's when you need AI to just snip out every single
yeah. Which I think can be done.
Probably, yeah.
I think there's an AI podcast thing that you can take those out.
It'll take things out like
yeah. Another thing, and I know it's an expressional word, but I say wow a whole load because everyone's like, they say something and I'm like, wow, because it is wow, you know. But I say that too much. I need to maybe flip it up and say that's amazing and stuff, or just maybe a subtle nod. I don't know,
mix
but
it up
that's
a little bit.
Something I need to work on.
All that being said, it might become something that is quite endearing to a lot of listeners.
Yeah,
a bit like was it who was the actor who was known for going, oh wow? There's an actor who's known for going, oh wow. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. Wow. And maybe one day someone will cut like an hour montage and it'll be every single time Joseph Funnell has said wow on his podcast, and it would just be an hour of you going wow, wow, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Let's turn it into a drinking game.
Yeah. Every time. Wow. Yeah. Have a sip.
And I think hopefully the intro to the world of Funnel Your Thoughts does this, but I'd like guests to lead on to guests. I don't necessarily want to get to the stage where I think it will be amazing and I will never ever say no, but I'm not necessarily looking for celebrities to come on. I think on the most part, you can Google or Wikipedia pretty much everything you need to know about most celebrities, if not all of them. It's amazing how just, for example, like the people I meet in the pub, how they have amazing stories. And okay, no doubt a lot of celebrities will have amazing stories, but it's amazing how just your everyday Joe has amazing story to give. And I think the biggest changes sort of for the podcast going forward will be the room. I want to incorporate Granny gave me a book literally days before she passed. I want that to go on a shelf, and the shelf be maybe a big part of that wall, kind of like a media shelf. Got some cowboy and Indian books that my granddad gave me. I remember it like it was yesterday. They all came in their perfect boxes. Her mum didn't think we needed the boxes, and it looked unneat on the bookshelf, so she threw out all the boxes, and I'm like, Mum, the boxes are like half what is part of them. But it's one of those things. But they're amazing, soft hard covers, and like they're like spongy.
Oh,
They're
interesting.
like really old. Just a few things like that mean a great deal that I want on a shelf. I want some green, so maybe try and get some plants in here.
Oh, that'd be nice. Some what's the term? Feng shui.
Yeah, to make you just feel a bit more
chill.
Yeah, and then so this wall in particular was all that wood came from an old cattle shed that when we first moved here, my dad restored with my granddad. So pretty much all of these boards would have been put up by my granddad, and I knew one day I'd reuse them for something, so I kept all of them. And then so that wood is now here, and obviously means a great deal to have.
That's really cool. That's very sustainable.
Yeah.
As well. You mentioned also one other thing I want listeners to know is that you mentioned to me earlier before we started recording about using solar power to help power the studio.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
So again, I wanted the studio. I could have ran a wire down from up the top and sort of tied it into everything and put a meter in and things, but I like the idea of giving back to the sort of eco side, and I don't think I probably don't know, but equally I don't think I really have heard of another solar powered podcast. And touch wood, in the summer it's fully solar power. It's pretty awesome to be completely sustainable in that way. And even the room, not only was it to save money, but I think I like to just learn and try my hand at things, and apart from the plastering, we did everything.
Wow.
So all the wiring wired to the solar panels, everything. I wanted the TV to be controlled from there, so I hid in the wall a HDMI that runs from there all the way around, and it's that little plug in the wall there. So it's actually got a wall socket for the HDMI.
Ah, smart.
So yeah, just little things. I'd never hung a door before. That was a challenge. I built this table. Wasn't the original table I planned, but it's a great table.
Would you ever consider having, say, more than one person on the show, or are you going to keep that more intimate, direct, one-to-one kind of feel?
I think intimate, direct, one-to-one kind of feel, but equally, I know a lot of older people, and not necessarily older people actually, but I know a lot of people who have virtually been together their entire lives, as in a relationship. So I think it'd be great. One day I'd love to have 4 mics in here, and I think it would be great to have a 4-way conversation about sort of meaningful stories, and getting the emotion from a couple that have been together literally forever, I think would be a great concept as well, because I think the ups and downs of life as a long-term companionship is interesting.
Oh yeah, fascinating. And also I think from what I've read, that's becoming increasingly rare. People aren't staying together as long now as they used to. And I think being able to interview people like that, you'll probably get a lot of insight into what it's actually like to be together for that long. Plus, if you were talking to both of them at the same time, they're going to bounce off of each other and or tease each other or remind, oh, well, this happened. No, that's not what happened. This is what happened. And then you get two sides of the same story, which is always quite interesting.
Absolutely. So yeah, I think that's a great concept. And who knows? Yeah, maybe a couple of specials, because there might be a time where once a week, and this is just an off the dome kind of thought, but maybe once a week I like helping people. And I think I'm very good at flipping things and thinking outside of the box. So I think a premise where I can have call-ins of people that are just seeking advice on random things would be quite a nice thing to do. They call in, they can remain anonymous or not, and I can just say, look, by the sounds of it, and
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, you could do that and maybe live stream it as well.
Yeah.
Because obviously, there's the potential for things to go wrong or go a bit off rails, but that's what's exciting about it. It's live and it's happening right here, right now.
Exactly.
Plus, you could have people in some sort of chat.
Yeah.
That might be really cool, actually.
Yeah.
Especially if, let's say, that you're interviewing someone who had a particular, a very particular experience in something, for example, or a very unique story in which they are able to offer advice that the majority of people wouldn't be able to.
Yeah.
So, for example, like let's take the example of the hedgehog sanctuary. I don't know many people I don't know anyone who's built a hedgehog sanctuary or who's gone through the experiences that lady has had. But I can only imagine if someone were to call in as an example and say, well, I've actually got the same condition that you had. How did you how did you get through it and everything? What an incredible experience for the person calling to be able to have that conversation. And how fascinating for everybody else listening as well.
100%.
So that I really like that idea. I think it's a really good idea. That could be really fascinating. Really
I think so. I think maybe once a month, or it depends how popular, but I'd really like to do that because I think in modern day there's a lot of beating around the bush. So yeah, whereas I can just say,
right, sure,
which I think could be fun, but we'll see. At the moment, I'm loving learning about people, and I think in some ways you will learn about people through that, but I think it's my way of I suppose in general my concept for the podcast is giving back, but I'd like to go that one step further, and if I can help people out of a jam or out of a whatever,
out of a pickle,
because I'm quite good at that, I think, from what I've been told.
Well, it sounds like you're well on your way to creating a podcast that's unique and wholesome and, to put it perhaps somewhat coldly, useful, but useful in a very positive way. Yeah. And in, dare I say, in a very human way as well. You're not necessarily talking about topics or things or objects. You're talking about people. Yeah. And importantly, you're talking about everyday people, not a celebrity, not famous people. You're talking to people about themselves, not in a narcissistic or a vain way, but in a very human way. Tell me your story.
100%.
Talk to me and let's have a conversation, like you said, about that story and your experiences, rather than it being just an interview or, again, just talking about someone else. Yeah. And I think that sounds to me like a very positive thing, especially now, coming back to what you said earlier, when so many people do feel a bit lonely or isolated. And being able to give people a bit of that insight into a human being, I think, is a wonderful thing. Yeah. Especially now for someone who perhaps feels a bit socially isolated or finds it difficult to talk to people. Being able to hear two human beings having a very interesting and very frank, candid and open and perhaps profound conversation, I think that's a really wonderful thing, because you're giving that opportunity to people who might struggle to do that themselves in person with other people. Yeah. And I think that's a really wonderful thing to provide, not just for them, but for anybody who wants to learn a bit more about what it means to be human and what it means to have a real meaningful conversation with another human being. I think that's a wonderful thing. Yeah, completely agree. So, should we summarize this? Should we wrap this up? I feel like let's wrap this up. Okay, cool. I feel like it's been awesome. So, if you give us a 1 minute summary, if you will, of your podcast, what it's all about, why people need to listen to it, just to summarize everything we've said. We've talked a lot in detail, but if you could give us a little blurb, what would it be? To summarize in the blurb, I think it's very important to roll back on. Take yourself back 300 years. Imagine you're listening to your great ancestor. How amazing would that be? And that is, in a nutshell, the premise of the podcast. It's interesting stories, real stories about the makeup of what builds people and who makes you sitting in front of me here today, you. And I think that's important. And it's important to preserve, and I hope it will preserve, and I hope people enjoy it. And I hope we can really make something of this. Well, me too. And it sounds like you're well on your way to doing that. Yeah, I think so. I hope so. Watch this space, people. You heard it here first. Watch this space.